Welcome to Watching the Throne, a lyrical analysis of Kanye West. My name is Travis Bean, and today is a very special day. It is the last time you'll hear me by myself without Chris. I do have a guest, but Chris isn't here, and I know everyone likes Chris more than me, so this is great. The last time you'll just hear me talking to somebody. We're here today with Don, the founder and runner of the Most Unruly channel. How you doing today, Don?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good. Don or Donald?
Ideally, Don.
Okay, cool. And,
Donald is for a smaller group of people.
Okay. Those are for family gatherings.
Basically, or anybody who has as close as family.
Yeah. And I have to, please forgive me, I forgot your most important credit. You're a co-writer of the Yeezus book.
That is true. I almost forgot that. Yes. Co-writer of the Yeezus book. I wrote all about, for anybody who reads it or picks it up, I wrote all about the tour and the stage design. And I think I wrote a little bit about production in there too. So
yeah, it was,
yeah.
I actually was looking through the book the other day, and I'm not trying to pimp myself up, and Don, you can take or leave this, but I was like, man, this is impressive.
I definitely said that about my writing as well. Yeah.
That's your inner Kanye coming out.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely, yeah.
The ego.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not the most humble person in the room.
So we're doing a bunch of episodes here where we're talking with different people about their reactions to Jesus is King. I got kind of nervous when I set out to do all of these episodes, because the second I secured interviews with everyone I wanted to talk to, I got this immediate fear of oh God, is this going to be worth it? We're just going to have 5 stands coming on talking about Kanye and how much they love Jesus is King. Is there any value to that? And what's happened, I think, on each episode is everyone's brought a really unique perspective to the album and kind of are experts in their own way. And I definitely think that's the case here today with Don, who is posted about it on Twitter, and just knowing his background and the way the kind of music he likes, I think he's going to bring a really fresh perspective to this. But before we get into that, we're going to do what we've been doing for everybody and kind of taking a broader look at your relationship with Kanye in the last couple of years or so, since the last few years have been the most complicated time to ever be a Kanye fan.
The most unruly.
Yeah. Yes.
The most unruly of times. It was
Yes.
the worst of times.
Your channel becomes very meta in that sense.
Yeah.
So I guess the period between Pablo and Ye, Pablo happens, Kanye's going through a lot. He's basically gone for an entire year and then comes back. I want to just get a sense of how you're feeling about Kanye during the front half of 2018, and how you feel about the Wyoming projects. What is your relationship with Kanye, and how are you reacting to his creative output?
It's definitely gotten to the place where I've made a clear distinction between the artist and whatever it is that we get from him. And that has made actually things a little easier, because I think when I was younger, and in kind of when you're younger anyways, with any kind of music artist that you love or a band or whatever, you are a diehard. You evangelize about that, that band or that artist. And usually you kind of fall in love with the personality just as much as the music. I feel like that's very typical. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, when you have someone who changes as much as Kanye, a lot of people don't change so much. Mm-hmm. And so when he changes so much, it kind of does get to a point where at a certain point, he's going to hit somewhere, a place in his life or a place in his mindset where I'm probably totally not going to agree with him or mm-hmm. even like the things that he says or whatever. So then I will have to just look at it, maturely from the perspective of an artist. Mm-hmm. someone who I went to film school, I studied art in general,
mm-hmm.
So to be able to You do that with movies. There's like so many directors that, you know, it's probably best not to know about their lives.
That's
you know,
I don't want to jump in. I don't want to cut you off or anything, but I always think that's
yeah.
an interesting distinction between like musicians and filmmakers, because yes, there are so many filmmakers that are like shitty people, just like complete assholes who make movies that we love. And I think the difference with the musician is like, musician is in your ear, you know, you're hearing their voice.
Right.
And it's really, really hard at that point to separate the art from the artist.
Yeah, it can be. But I kind of like to look at it in like a time capsule format. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, it's like whatever he says or does in the future does not take away from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy or even old Kanye. You know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's nothing like the College Dropout, so I can't listen to the College Dropout anymore. And that makes no sense, because the College Dropout embodies a completely different time. Right. You know, like it is like a time capsule. So I don't understand that, you know, kind of retroactively, you know, deciding like, I'm so sorry, I repent of all of this, no Kanye, you know, I'm deleting everything. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm at a place where it's just like, more than anything, I'm paying attention to the art, you know, the fashion, the music, the performances,
Totally.
and thankfully, because he has enough output of that stuff recently, I'm just able to appreciate all of that stuff. So even though he goes crazy on the other end of things, he actually has given us enough content that I can not pay attention to that.
Interesting. Yeah. I feel like people probably have this impression of me because I run a podcast where I talk about Kanye like every week, that I am somebody who is into Kanye that way. Like, I am definitely, I mean, I follow Kanye. I feel like I'm kind of obligated to because of the show, but I definitely don't like idolize him, or like I'm inspired by him in many ways, but I don't like bow down at his feet and defend everything he says. I feel like some people can take that impression away from us, when I think most of the time I'm just trying to provide context for the things he says, because he's not the best communicator in the world. But I think first and foremost, like, we really do look at the art. Like, we are an art focused show. And I think that's really important if you're talking about an artist, and if you're going to be talking about stuff they say out in the public, like, it doesn't make sense to me to talk about them at all unless you understand their art, because that's where they most freely and concisely express themselves.
Yeah, it's one of the more pure forms, you know, of communication. If you can be an artist, which everyone cannot be, not everyone can be. When you are able to communicate well through the art, you know, a lot of times it's a better outlet, because, you know, there's a lot of artists who just cannot communicate well outside of their art. You know what I mean? And that's their place of like, this is who I am. And you're probably getting a more pure sense of me than, you know, when I'm on TMZ.
Okay, so with that kind of detached relationship you have with Kanye, how are you feeling about the Wyoming projects then?
I loved all of them. I love most of them. It was a funny time, because when he was coming out and talking about Trump, like, I do not at all agree with any of his ideas on Trump, but I was entertained, I'm not gonna lie. Like, just for him to come out, the man, like, it's like his first appearance, like, out of the hospital, and like
back to it.
Immediately, so I'm about to piss everybody off. Anybody that can be pissed off, that has any sort of a soul, is going to be so angry at me right now. And I was just like, man, what a comeback! And like, I'm not saying it was good. I'm just saying what a comeback.
Yeah.
So it was fascinating to me. A lot of people, you know, I talk to people and they're like, I don't find it fascinating at all. I just find it dumb and stuff. And I would say it's like 90% dumb, but you know, but there is that 10% of fascination is what really got me. It was just kind of this whole idea of, you know, I actually firmly believe that, you know, he had a clear idea in his head of what he wanted to get across, and then just came out and explained none of it. You know, like, didn't explain any. You can tell by his passion and the way he talked about it that there was something on his heart that he was really trying to communicate, and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
So seeing that was really interesting to me, and seeing how it divided people, and how everybody, I knew cancel culture was coming before it became like something that really people were like hashtagging and stuff. So when that happened, it was really interesting to me, because I already kind of knew. I was like, oh, well, maybe people will stop listening, but I was like, there's no way. I was like, I was at Tyler the Creator's fashion show, because I used to work at an agency. So I worked at the agency that represented him. So I went to his fashion show the fashion show was called Made LA, and it was right next to the Staples Center. And I can't remember what the name of it was like Golf de Fleur or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
His collection. I should know that. He sent me like 2 pairs of shoes, because everybody,
you should send it back.
Yeah, everybody got like complimentary free pair of shoes like that at that event, but like it took like a year. For them to get there. So he also sent an extra pair, like an extra free. So I got 2 free pairs, which is really funny. And I've never really worn them, because they're actually not really my style. But like it's an awesome souvenir. It was free. I didn't pay for anything.
Yeah.
But I was there, and Kanye was there to support Tyler, and it took a long time for him to show up. And
Kanye?
Yeah, it took a really long time for him to show up, and he finally showed up. And actually, funny story is, I'm running around with a camera, I'm filming most of this event, and I'm running around with a camera, and for some reason we're allowed to go through the fitting rooms, and I don't know how that happened. I don't know how that was okay, and like,
it probably wasn't.
No, but it was weird, because you would walk by, and like Tyler would be walking by, and he's not saying hi to anybody, because you can see he's still trying to figure out what he's gonna do for the show. But I'm like surprised he wasn't like yelling at us or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you know what I mean? It was just really weird. And then no lie, I'm like so focused. I'm running through. I legit almost crash into Kendall Jenner.
Oh wow!
Like we would have like totally face to face just crashed. But I caught myself, and I was able to move out of the way. And by the way, what she was wearing was fire. It was like her fit was fire. It was like orange. Actually, you can look it up if you just look it up. You can see what she was wearing.
I'm about ready to do that right now.
It was like bright orange or something like that, and she had like the big ass sunglasses, and then Kanye comes in, and the funny part is I'm wearing my I Feel Like Kobe shirt the whole time, and Kanye walks in, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to get to this part of the story. So, anyways,
you can't pass up the Kendall Jenner crash. That's an important detail.
I had to tell that part. But Kanye comes in, and people are screaming.
Oh my god!
Like screaming, and there's a lot of kids in there, but still, like, and no lie, I'm watching bodyguards straight up like throw people out of the way,
God.
and he's just walking through just with a little entourage. I believe it was him. It was oh my gosh, what is his name? His close friend with the awesome mustache, and he has his own fashion line, and he worked with like Von Dutch. He was on like Hot 97 a couple times.
I should know this. Yeah.
Is it Tracy? No, it's his friend. He has I'll remember it later, because he's actually like really important. But he was there. Like 2 Chainz was there. Gucci was invited, but he wasn't there.
Tracy Jordan. Just kidding.
No, that would be amazing. No, but Gucci was supposed to be there. He wasn't there. But, I saw how everyone was so enamored. And I'm like, that's exactly how it is everywhere he goes. So when people were talking about canceling him, I was like, nah, there's no way. Like, there's really no way it can be done.
So in general, you feel good about Kanye's art in the Wyoming period then?
Yeah, once I got past all that other stuff, I like, which was a lot to get past.
Yeah.
When Ye came out, that was very, very emotional album for me, because as I mentioned on Twitter, I have also had a nervous, or whatever you call it, breakdown. So when Kanye had one, I totally understood. I understood how that happens, with the stresses that he was going through, because a lot of what happened to me was very stress induced. It was just, I was just dealing with, more stress than, 20-year-old me could handle. 19-year-old me, actually. So in that, hearing that he went to the hospital, I understood and I felt for him, and then obviously so much time went by. But as I watched, there'll be a picture here and there of him just hanging out at Rick Rubin's house and stuff like that, and you know what I mean, and just like chilling out, and and like for me, actually, Kanye was a big part of my therapy growing up, because I used to watch him make beats, and so I was like, I want to make beats, and that's what I would do. I just do that like every day in like the summers and stuff like that. And that's just what I do. And so it kept my mind focused, and, little by little, you get, things start to clear up a little bit. So when all that happened, I saw it and I was like, okay, I understand, I empathize. And then Ye comes out, and it's just, he did such a good job at really capturing kind of the soul of that, of that type of burden that someone goes through mentally. And even in the songs where, and I don't know if it has to do with like how rough the album is or whatever, but there's just times when it just sounds very, like he's still going through something. You know what I mean? Like, and I know that he says, the albums were therapy. So you can kind of hear some of that come through, that, that he like really needed to make this album, even if a lot of people don't like it. And then when Tiana was actually one of my absolute favorites. I know Kids See Ghosts was like everybody's like thing, and I really love it too. I don't listen to it as much as I thought I would, but I do love it. And but Tiana Taylor's album, I loved just hearing that type of Kanye, that type of production, where he's really kind of a lot more simple. It's like about like loops, he's more like looping samples and stuff, as opposed to just like going nuts on like his own albums, where he's like chopping it up and having producers add all this extra stuff, to see that it's like, oh, okay, he just got a loop from the sample and added some drums, and there you go. And she sang so beautifully on it that it felt also kind of new, because it was like such high quality vocals over such like simple, dirtier beats. So I like that. Nasir, I was okay on.
Most people are.
I don't like his delivery. I don't like his lyrics in it. And I know a lot of people are like, I'm actually in the camp that I don't care about lyrics as much. Definitely not as much as I used to when I was younger. But now that I don't think they're valuable, if you can make awesome music and have great lyrics, then you're amazing.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know. But the production was great. The production was great. And so I would say that all in all, that whole season was pretty productive to me. They seem like effective projects for the most part.
For all the people complaining about like, Jesus is King has a bunch of short songs and Ye only had 7 songs. Like, man, he put out like a lot of shit in a really short period of time. Yeah, and
I guess it would be like the equivalent of like 2 long albums, you know. But it was interesting because not only was it a lot of tracks, but it was also, and I don't know why I forgot about Daytona. Like, that's some of the best production you've heard from Kanye since like,
it's cool,
since like Late Registration, maybe. Just that type of Kanye, and also just knowing that he, like, you can tell how much extra work he put into Daytona versus like his own project.
Yeah, Daytona definitely feels like the one, like, because maybe it's just because like it came out on time, but it felt like it was ready. Like they had been working on it for a while, and it was like it just sounded so what it was. And
probably because when they were, because they were hanging out together, maybe Kanye felt like it was a priority. And then funny because then he's talking about, and that's when he discovered he wanted to make how he was going to make the Tiana album. So sometimes I wonder if like Pusha was like super like jealous of the time, I wonder. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just going back and forth, you know. And I know like he was like so nervous at seeing in interviews like before it dropped, and he was like, I think he was talking about he was like begging, please, Ye, hoping for Daytona to come out on time. And then in the interview, they're like, oh, so is Ye coming out, you know, this Friday? And he was just like, I hope so, like, please, you know, like. And that was the other thing too. Like, even though they were late at uploading it to the streaming services, it still was. It was pretty consistent. Like, we got it around like very close to around the time they were promised.
Yeah, very true.
That was pretty cool.
Although I guess Teyana's was the only one that was like they kept fixing it and it wasn't quite.
That's
ready.
true. I think that was like a full week, right, of a delay.
That was a bummer. I agree. I love Teyana's album, and I feel like I've talked to a few producers now, and every time I talk to them, they're like, "Man, Teyana's album, like that was the one." And yeah,
it's a good one. I love it.
And then I guess I want to get into post Ye heading into Jesus is King and everything Kanye was going through. I know you said you don't follow Kanye that closely, but I guess loosely knowing about Kanye and kind of the spiritual journey he was going on and how he seemed to be finding Christianity again. And I know that was important for you. So do you have any reaction to Kanye going through that process?
Oh, yeah. And I would say that I still definitely pay attention to a lot of things that Ye does. I just stay out of my opinions of it.
Okay.
Typically. And also a big reason for that too is because since he changes his mind so much, I feel like some conversations are like fruitless because like you'll say something and then it's like, whoop, sorry, I was wrong. or you know, or I was right and this is just bullshit that's continuing and it's going nowhere.
Right.
So with this era of Kanye, I found it fascinating. Like, I paid attention to the very first Sunday service that came out. I was like, I remember seeing on Kim's. I follow Kim Kardashian. Everybody,
oh yeah, of course.
If you want to learn, if you want to catch some Kanye stuff early, you might, you know. And also, if you have a girlfriend that maybe is into those bodysuits that she's making, you never know. You never know. And yeah, it's funny because my wife, I think we both follow Kim, but then also like she has this big Rihanna obsession, and so is I. I mean, I don't know how you can't, but it's just funny like seeing, you know, like I'm just like in my feed and it's just like a bunch of Kim posts and a bunch of Rihanna posts.
Sounds awesome to me.
And a lot of times I'm like, this is a lot, But going back to Sunday service, when she posted that, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I realized like how small it was, and I was like, oh, I wonder if it's just gonna stay like that. Like, I wonder if it's just his like one of his little experiments, you know, and it's gonna be this private little thing. And then as like the weeks kept going on, and they kept like the choir started getting bigger, I was like, oh man, like this is crazy. And hearing the choir sing like actual, you know, gospel songs and in the gospel style, and like being true to like the roots of the black church, in the way that they carry themselves, and the way that they sing, and the way that the arrangements are made, like it's so authentic, and you know it's real because these people are actually that, you know, they're actually they sing gospel. I'm sure they probably all of them sung in the church, you know. Most of them do. Most people do, especially black people. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, there is a lot more emphasis on music in the black church versus, you know, the traditional evangelical kind of middle America Christianity that I feel like is the most prevalent. It's like the most publicized. And so like black church is like way more musical. Like, you know, and so to see that, you know, and to see what Kanye could do with it, I mean, I always wanted to see like what could he do with gospel music, and also hearing about Kirk Franklin talking about how he wanted to produce for Kirk Franklin and make like awesome gospel music and raise the production level. Like, I knew at a certain point he was going to do that. like he had to. And so seeing that happen, I was like, okay, this is awesome. This is where I imagine Kanye going. And then especially once he started sampling like Fred Hammond and stuff, I was like, okay, so now he's getting interested in sampling this stuff. And now I'm like, okay, now he really knows about Fred Hammond, who in my opinion is one of the top 5 musicians of all time. His gospel music is so well arranged. His melodies are so just the most infectious melodies, like the most consistent, I would say, of a lot of gospel artists. Like how it's just like every track after track after track is just like this brilliant. He just has this brilliant musicianship. I mean, he's looked up to Michael Jackson like his whole life, so you can kind of see like he has this. For anyone who listens to, I would say the best introduction to Fred Hammond would be this album that he came out with, I believe it was in the late 90s, called Purpose by Design. And he's with this other group, this gospel group, and it's like a collaborative album between the two. And it's very it's really interesting because it is very like scriptural and very like heavy on like talking about the specifics of like God and the specifics of like God's character, but at the same time the music and the lyrics and the way it flows is like so natural,
right?
And and so like impressive that like you can't help but enjoy it, And so hear that Kanye was listening to Fred was really exciting, and then. Once, I was trying to remember, did he ever end up talking about it early on? A little bit when he did the David Letterman interview. And then when he's talking about James Turrell, and I really like appreciate James Turrell's work. And so I'm like, okay, I like where this version of Kanye is going. And I can see where this is leading up to. And so when, everyone's like, when's Yandhi coming out? I'm like, there is no Yandhi. Like I was like, once January hit, wait, when did he start Sunday service?
Yeah, I think in January.
Once January hit, I'm like, Yandhi's dead. It's over. Once he started doing Sunday services, I'm there like, there is no Yandhi.
Right. Which was a bummer for me
way.
Because it was supposed to come out on my wedding day, and I thought like that's Kanye's secret message to me. Like he knows and he loves the show.
It's all meant to happen. Yeah, I know. I mean, it was disappointing for sure to like have it just go away, and then, but there were good times. I forgot during that whole time. I also got to go see Kid Seagos perform live at Camp Flogna. Wow! And so that was another cool thing too. I think to really kind of be a good bookend to those Wyoming sessions. But back to the Jesus King stuff. I could tell that he was going to move more towards that direction, and so I was always kind of laughing at everyone just like waiting for Yandhi, and then the leaks coming out, and them somehow still thinking that these tracks are gonna be on the album. Like I just couldn't believe how naive they were. But then once again, I remember that these fans are younger because this is how it's always been.
Yeah,
and I have a friend who's like day one, like before people really knew Kanye. And so he's like, he always tells me, he's like, this is the same Kanye. I think the only difference is really completely missing a deadline. But you know what I mean? But the but the changing up and like seeing how like, there's so many times where he's done that, where he's been working on something and he pivots. I mean, like we've never gotten Good Ass Job. And like that's a classic example, of us expecting something to happen and it not happening at all. And then instead of a Good Ass Job, instead of getting Good Ass Job, we got 808s, right? Completely different. Right. People are completely mixed because like they're like, I didn't see this coming. I expected what was said before. So we kind of create in our minds this album, and a lot of people were doing that with Yandhi. I remember the leaks were coming out. I think I only listened to one of them. I believe it was The Storm, which turned into Everything We Need. Right. But the funny thing about Everything We Need was I always felt that the Everything We Need part was way better than what was on The Storm. And so, but I know people, they like the extra drums and all that stuff. But when they were performing Everything We Need at Sunday service, it was way more powerful. And so I was like, I really hope that comes on the album. So when I heard that melody on The Storm, I was like, okay, he's gonna use this at some point for sure. It's gonna and so, but like once again, I didn't listen to really anything else because I was like, why would I do that? He's making an album right now. Like it's just like, you know, a movie coming out and they're like, hey guys, like we got some like unfinished scenes that have leaked. Like some people like to look at that stuff, but I'm like, that like completely ruins the experience for me.
I know. I'm in the same boat, and I'm always afraid to admit this because I feel like we'll get a bunch of 1-star reviews on iTunes, or like people will call me a fake fan. But like, I never listen to leaks or anything like that, because if I'm gonna listen to a Kanye song, I want to listen to a Kanye song, and I want it in the context of like an album he's carefully crafted.
Yeah, I understand that, and the only time I listen to a leak is if it's like a 90% chance that it's never going to come out.
Right.
Like, you know, like he drops things like "You'll Never See Me Again" after, before My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and after the Taylor Swift thing. You know that. I think a lot of people knew that was never going to be on an album, because there's no way that he's going to make the next album and have a song saying "You'll Never See Me Again." So it's like, okay, of course I'm going to listen to that, or maybe the old version of like Homecoming with John Legend. Of course I'm going to listen to that, the new one, you know. But I'm not listening to something that's a good chance that it's on the next album for two reasons: expectations, and then it just ruins it. Yeah. You know, I don't want to. I remember, and I don't regret it. I remember seeing that somebody leaked something. It was like an Instagram story or just any. And no, I think it was just a vertical video filmed, and it was in the studio, and I heard the chorus to "Father Stretch My Hands."
Oh man.
And I was, and it was like I think it was like 2 days before, or maybe even the night before the album came out. And so I don't really regret that, because that stayed just as good. Like that is like the best, like top 5 Kanye songs.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you know, so that's okay, because it was so good. But everything else, I don't want to do that. So I don't really feel bad for the people who are disappointed with Jesus is King, because they listen to the leaks. It's like that. That's what you get. That's how things work. You know, you spoil something before it comes out. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
And you know, you see Pusha T tweet about it and all this stuff. And so I'm sure, you know, it's a terrible thing. It's cheating, and it's stealing, and it's just like, it's just everything that ruins the experience to me. But there's a lot of people who jump all over. There's a lot of people who are like, I like Yandhi better than Jesus is King. It's like, okay, like I haven't really listened to it, so maybe you're right, but I doubt it. Like listening to the Storm, I was like, like it's not finished. And Jesus is King, it feels rushed in some senses, but it feels more finished than that stuff, the leaks. Yeah. And so yeah, I just thought it was funny that people were expecting Yandhi. So then once we get into the actual like announcement. Wait, did anything big happen before the announcement of Jesus is King?
Do you mean, what do you mean?
Oh, Coachella, right? There was the Coachella Sunday service.
Yeah.
I loved that. I really loved watching that. I thought it was great to see, you know, as a Christian, it was great to see a lot of people sing about Jesus, and people who came to hear people sing about Jesus without any sense of judgment. You know, without any sense of, I think the beauty of doing it in Coachella, it was like you truly get this diverse group of people, who I'm sure a large percent of them maybe are not religious at all in any way. And so for them to come like and unify to see that, even if they don't believe in that, I feel like is really beautiful and very inclusive. Right. You know, because I feel like a lot of times it's really this sense of like, well, if you don't believe, like, you can sit in the pew, but you can't really participate. You know what I mean? And so I feel like with Sunday service, it's the opposite of that. And that's what I really love about it. But then, you know, you see, once Kanye was like crying heavily after the DMX prayer, I got like a sense that it's like, okay, this man is changing. Because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be in those services and like feel like the Spirit of God convict you or encourage you or, you know, maybe bring clarity on something, and to have those tears flow because, you know, something is opened in your heart. And I think in his sense, and he talks about, you know, how it was like either like the next day or something that he, you know, he, I would say made the commitment because, well, and I'll go into that later, but made the commitment to follow Jesus. And, you know, so then that, I think he did something else afterwards. And when Jesus is King comes out, when I hear when I see the title and I see the track list posted on Twitter, I was like, that's first of all, I was like, that's really awesome. And two, I was like, this is exactly what it was leading up to. I knew it. And so, and it wasn't even like, oh, I predicted it like a genius. It was like, if you just follow it, like, and not everybody's following it. You know, and that's okay. But if you do see it in your social media timeline, somehow every weekend, and of course, because I follow a lot of fans in general, and of course, like the Team Kanye Daily and everything, I'm going to see it. So watching it all up to that point, I was like, this is natural. It makes 100% sense to me. And I don't know, I was very excited to hear it immediately. And once he announced the date, I was like, that's awesome. It's not coming out on that date, but that's awesome. And yeah, it's like anytime, I don't believe a single date ever. Not anymore. I can't.
You don't think Jesus is Born is coming out on Christmas?
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
Jesus will be born on not Christmas. It'll happen another day.
Well, and historically, he was not born on December 25th.
Just keeping in line with that, yeah.
And I think, actually, ironically, I believe historians have kind of got a general sense of the birthday, I think, around like between like March and June.
Oh gosh, then
so it's like closer
from then.
It's closer to Easter. So Jesus is born and risen like right next to each other. So he has to come out with 2 albums in the same month. But yeah, no, it's not coming out on Christmas. But I appreciate everything he's doing and seeing how not only is he showing his faith, but primarily for the entire year, he has elevated a choir. Mm-hmm. He has allowed a conductor, you know, to just lead them, and he steps to the side. And really, I remember at Coachella, he was telling cameramen to just like change the shots and focus on the choir and not focus on the choir and not just him. Mm-hmm. So I really got this sense of him really elevating the black community, the black Christian community, because, you know, that's the funny thing too about Christianity. You know, one of the most famous things to say is that Sunday is the most segregated day of the week, every week. Mm-hmm. And there still is. There's a lot of tension between white church versus black church, because the values are different. They believe in the same God, but it's still both have different interpretations. You know, and sometimes it's not even interpretations on how to read the Bible. Sometimes it's just interpretations on just how to live your life.
Sure.
You know, and so yeah. I think with that, to see him elevate that aspect and kind of give it a spotlight, to really show the world, like, you know, you guys have a vision of what Christianity is like because of what TV and movies and just the influence of Middle America and how big it is in the Bible Belt. Like, there's a whole other section of Christianity, and to see him elevate that was awesome. And I was really excited to, to hear what they would sound like on the album, and just excited about the fact that there is a mainstream album called Jesus is King. I started all my work. I started my career in the Christian hip hop industry, and I worked. There's actually, I would say, one of the most famous Christian rappers that today goes by the name of Lecrae. Mm-hmm. And he's charted enough, pretty impressive for a Christian rap artist. But I started working with like his clique of people. And so because I was working with one of the most popular ones, I really got to get a sense of kind of the cult of personality that happens in like that world, and how like isolated it is, and just separate from the rest of everything. And a lot of it is ironic because I would listen to them really speak heavily about how they wanted their message to have a wider appeal. But all of their music was always like so like preaching to the choir so much that it sounded like you only want your audience to be church people anyways. Sure. So then what ends up happening is like they would get bitter, or they would get frustrated at like, why isn't my message like coming out clearer? And it's like, well, it's because like the way you talk about it makes it sound like it's only for you and not for anybody else. And that's actually not what they intend to do, but that's what happens for a lot of people. And so to watch year after year after year, to see people that I know or whatever try really hard to get to that spot. And not speaking of Lecrae, I've seen other people in the Christian community really water down what they're talking about in hopes of becoming more appealing to a larger crowd, kind of dumbing down just their views on spirituality, hoping that it's more accessible. And it's failed most of the time. And so then so it's funny that they did that in hopes of becoming more popular, but then you get like Chance the Rapper, being very like vocal about his faith, and like not whenever he talks about his faith, which isn't all the time, but whenever he talks about his faith, it's not watered down. Like, that he tries to speak his truth as clearly as possible. And so when Jesus is King was coming out, I was like, first of all, the title in and of itself, I'm like, that's so bold. Yeah. I was like, I know so many Christian artists who will not do that. I know about a lot of Christian artists, and it's very large. So if there's if this gets shared around and one of the Christian artists who knows me, I'm not talking about you. I'm just I know a lot about, what goes around, and just in general, there's human patterns, that you can see. You don't even have to know every Christian rapper to understand what's going on in that mindset and the way that they approach things. And it is true that over the course of the years, there has been this fear for a lot of people to really talk about their faith in a passionate and direct way. And so to see Jesus is King comes out, well, not comes out yet, but to see that title is like, oh wow, so he's really like, he's Christian, and he's on another wavelength that he hadn't been before. And that was really exciting to see, because I was like, this is the biggest voice saying this since like Bob Dylan, maybe.
Yeah, right.
And so that in and of itself was exciting. I was like happy just for that alone.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, and then when it comes out finally, there's a lot of interesting things. Once it came out, I was kind of thinking, I was like, people aren't gonna like this. I just like.
You mean on that initial listen, like you just knew?
Yeah, I was just like, people are not gonna like this.
Like not in the way that they don't usually like a Kanye album, because I feel like every time a Kanye album comes out, like there's a front of people saying it's terrible. You think just because of like the gospel-y sound, like people are gonna reject it?
I thought it was a mixture of things. I thought his lyrics are very reminiscent to me of some Christian artists who are newly saved. A lot of the Christian artists that I know about, are very mature in their faith at this point, because it's been a decade. But when I met a lot of them, they were so new in their faith and so excited that it was hard for them to really get too much deeper than I love Jesus and Jesus saved me and I'm so happy and I have peace and I have joy. That is such a common thing. It's even common for people who are not artists. I mean, I've even had kind of an experience that I've realized, I didn't even realize that this was unique, but I've been to a lot more churches than the average Christian. A lot of my parents were very smart. Well, they're not dead.
And they're not stupid now. They're
they're very smart. My parents are very smart, and a lot of times churches we'd be at, the sermons started getting weird. The opinions started getting too strict, or just things that really felt like not Christ-like were happening, and so that we would just move. We would just go to another church. We would just like uproot and go. Like they had no problem with that. So I've been to a lot of churches because humans are humans, and that happens. And humans fuck up, especially in the church, because in the church, because there's such a focus on being Christ-like, when someone fucks up, it's way more apparent. Way more apparent, So, but we would move when necessary. And so I saw a lot of versions of Christianity. And what was interesting to me is everybody claimed to believe in the same God, but everybody had a different interpretation on how to serve him.
Sure.
It was really interesting. So when he came out and starts like quoting scripture, I'm not going to lie, that's like my least favorite thing about Christian rap. And like all apologies to God, I don't hate the Bible. That's not what it is. It's what it is that it just feels forced. It kind of just feels like, okay, hold on a second. Let me get my Bible out. Okay, this is what God says. Okay, I'm gonna put it, in the beginning of my song. But I understand the zeal. I understand. I've seen it in every church, even though they think differently. Every church that I've been to has people who have had that really zealous experience where they are truly consumed with the concept of being saved. And it's inspiring at times because, like, as someone who's believed since I was a kid, I haven't felt that way in a long time.
Right.
And so to see it is always really inspiring, and it kind of reminds me of like how significant my faith is to me when I see how it affects someone else. So it's great. So when I see Kanye doing that, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, he could have tightened that up a little bit, like from an artistic standpoint. He could have made the lyrics a little less forced, but he's so passionate, and I believe his passion, that I don't actually feel that bad about it. And well, not bad, that's not the right word, but I don't feel that critical about it.
Right.
Because I really sense that his zeal is actually real, and that's a very common thing, just to hear them just kind of mention those things. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's very shallow, and he's not really talking about like how deep his faith is. From experience, you don't. If he says that he like really became saved in April-ish, you don't know a lot. That's just natural. Like, you don't really know a lot. You might read a lot and stuff, but you don't really know like what it's like to live that faith out until you're doing it. And then years go by and you're tested, your patience is tested, you're learning how to forgive people wrong you in the future, and then you got to understand how to be humble and forgive them. There's a lot of intricacies that go with believing in Jesus, and now that doesn't all happen in just like 6 months. So I do not expect this man to get on the microphone and talk to me about the nuances of Christianity. It's just not going to happen. So I appreciate this rawness that comes from the album, because it reminds me a bit of Jesus. In a weird way. In a weird way, it reminds me of Jesus. Yeah, because Jesus is so abrasive, but still genius. And I'm not gonna say I don't think Jesus King is as tight and well crafted as Jesus, but that passion is very similar.
Yeah, they are very different in the sense that like Jesus feels like. I guess the way I've been looking at it, I said this to Chris the other day. Maybe this will sound stupid now that I'm saying it, like that thousands of people can hear it. But
yeah,
like Jesus to me is like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like it's so out there and different and so carefully crafted. Like every second of that album is immaculate. Like all the threads are connected. The storyline's like amazing. It's something you've never heard before. To where like Jesus is King is so personal. Like it's not really trying to be that. Like it feels like you're reading somebody's journal. So it feels like a French New Wave movie or something, like something like really intimate and in the moment. And you're really just capturing this one this one idea about a person that he's trying so hard to express. I don't know. I find that really interesting.
And he's really actually trying really hard to please God. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, this man has lost his mind and he's crazy when they hear about things like, he didn't want, people in the studio to have premarital sex while working on the album. Now, I do agree that's weird and judgmental. Very, very, what they would call in Christianity, very legalistic.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I understand, because that's still very common. Like, they believe, Jesus has saved them, and especially if there's a certain sin that they feel that they like, if there's certain sins they feel they've committed, that, like, if Kanye says, like, sex addiction, you get very sensitive, to things that have to do with sex and stuff like that, especially if you're newly saved. So you kind of start to feel just a little leery of all that stuff, and you feel like if you can encourage other people not to do it, you do that. So I don't, Kanye didn't really say how that conversation went in the studio either.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
Probably
Like,
told him to shut up.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they could have been like, hey, no premarital sex, and they're like, Kanye, I'm sleeping with my girlfriend tonight.
I'm a grown person.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a grown ass man. So I wouldn't even be surprised if they were just like, no, Kanye. But I've met so many. I've been that way in certain senses when I was young. Especially when you're young. You're like I said, going back to like music artists, you're a fan about everything. And so I had, and I think this is interesting about Kanye because. And I think I'm going to go a little bit into it because if people want to know what Kanye is talking about, when it comes to like the concept of salvation, it's a really complicated thing, because to think of salvation would be, when it comes to being a Christian, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God and that he is like your guide and the Lord over your life, typically we consider that good enough to be saved. It's not like our standard, but typically from what we've learned about Christ and stuff, that typically it seems like he says that that's, the path to being saved. So Kanye may have already been saved since a young age. I don't know his, only him and God know that. You know what I mean? Like how sincere he was about his faith, or if he was just, very superficial with it. So there's a very good chance that he was saved at a young age, but then there's a process called sanctification, and you can be saved by Jesus Christ and still not live his principles for a good season of time. You can still probably be aware. Maybe you're convicted and you want to, but you don't know how. And so I would think that if he was saved, then this is more of a rededication. It's like renewing your vows when you're married, and so being that he seems like to have been surrounded by people who are very, well versed in their faith, I'm sure he's learning things about Jesus and stuff that he didn't know when he was younger. So when someone says, do you want to follow him? Do you want to accept him? He's like, yes. And it feels very new to him because it is new. There's new information, there's new peace because maybe someone has told him. Like, a big thing that really gives people peace is knowing that it's just telling them that Jesus loves you and doesn't judge you. That's a big thing for people.
Right.
If they don't know about Jesus, those statements in and of itself is intriguing. But then they say, they bring on the concept of if you want to be saved and have eternal life, then follow Jesus. But I believe Jesus is more than just an escape from hell. I think that is a misconception. But people believe in Jesus, and there's a transformation that usually occurs because they want to follow his principles. So I believe that's just what Kanye is going through: a rededication, a reinvigoration of his faith, new passion. He feels that he has put away the sins of his sex addiction enough that it's not, it's not weighing on him like it was before. So that's all transformation. That's all, things that are going to lead to just like quoting scripture on the very first or second track of your album, because it's so real to you, and there's actually a good reason behind your zeal. If you feel that God is the reason that you're freed from your addiction, of course you're going to tell everybody. You know,
Right.
that's actually one of the most common things that happened when Jesus was alive. When he healed people, their very first thing to do was to go and tell everyone. The funny part is he would tell people not to tell anyone, and they would go and tell everybody. You know, and Jesus was actually a very private person. He actually didn't really like to hang around a lot of people. They even said there's scripture about how much he loved people, but that he didn't trust people. And so, but then that also shows his mercy, because he's also he's still inclusive, and he still you know what I mean? He's just like
Right.
the holiest introvert is what he is. and so so I think that was a big thing for Kanye, is breaking that thing that was burdening him, which was what he said was sex addiction, and you know, so now that he's free of that, you know, we see that he doesn't want to talk about explicit sex. We hear that he doesn't want to curse. I believe that God actually doesn't really care that much about cursing at all, but because cursing is just whatever we make it to be. We make up words, we add meaning, we take away
Does say damn on
meaning.
the album.
He changed it though. Now it's
did he
dead.
really?
He changed the word to dead.
Oh gosh.
It was I thought that was actually a pretty good placement of damn. I felt like in context it worked. But the thing is that, you know, that's very common. People feel like if they're saying a curse word, then they're actually cursing.
Yeah.
Like they're actually saying a curse, you know, or that some people are saying that there are some people who are too zealous, and they say, when you say these words, it hurts the Spirit of God. I don't believe that. God's way. The whole concept, like, you have a very weak concept of God if you're like, words are hurting him, you know? So
well, that probably has a lot to do with everything you're saying too, right? Like when you rediscover your faith, like you kind of go overboard, which I think Kanye is. He even said that in the Zane Lowe interview. He's like, you know, I'm still learning. Like maybe I'm not doing it correctly, and I think at the beginning it makes sense to like overcommit and do things like a little bit too much.
Oh yeah, and that was my problem too when I was young. I would just tell all these people about my faith, and sometimes be insensitive, or sometimes be, you know, not taking a cue and being like, look, the way you're talking about this is actually really bothering them. They're not going to listen to you. Why are you still talking? You know, that happens, you know, and you're still learning a lot about your faith, and you're learning what Jesus would and wouldn't do. You know, everybody says like, what would Jesus do? But very few people actually like look in the Bible to see what Jesus would do. Instead, typically people's version of Jesus in their mind is completely based on what someone else tells them about Jesus, in the sense of, for example, like middle American churches, you know, and when people talk about Jesus, that's the first Jesus that they think of, white Jesus with all these very Puritan kind of angry precepts, you know, like you better get things right, or but then it's like that's completely the opposite of the concept of Jesus. The whole concept of Jesus is that we are all sinful people, which we are. We can all agree that, even if we deny it, you know, deep down in your heart that you've committed some sins, possibly even an hour ago. You know what I mean? And that is human, and that is completely okay. But God is holy and pure, and most people agree that there is a God, the ideal version of God is a pure God. You know, is a holy God that doesn't sin, and that's also why we're intimidated by the whole concept of God, because it's like, okay, if there's this concept of someone who has never sinned, then how does he even know me? How can he understand me? How can he love me? How can he forgive me? If he's so holy, he doesn't know what it's like. You know, it's not, he doesn't know what it's like to be tempted every day, or to, you know, have a character flaw that causes you to constantly mess up. You know, it's like, well, you know, what can he do? What can he say about me? And that's, you know, where the concept of Jesus comes in, the concept that there was a holy God that wanted to relate to people. So then he created a son, and he put that son's spirit in a human being. And so that he can walk with people, and he could see, you know, there's a whole time when he actually went out. Jesus went out into the wilderness to be tempted, to fast, to see what it's like to be tempted by food, by power. You know, supposedly the devil came and said, if you are truly the Son of God, like, and if you're starving, then make bread. Or, you know, if, you know, why don't you test God and show, you know, how powerful you are and how you can't die and all this stuff. And Jesus is like, this is this is not what life is about. I'm not here to flex my power. I'm not here to test God. I'm here to learn about people, and I'm here to relate to people, and I'm here to save people, because the whole concept of if we're sinful and God is holy, then there's already a natural separation. So there's this sense of, how can I cross over? How can I commune with God, and how can God commune with me if we're this different? And so Jesus comes in and is like, okay, I'm a human being, but I'm also God. And and he comes in and he starts healing people. He starts accepting prostitutes. He starts accepting people who are, thieves, and people who have killed people and all this stuff. And they're like, who is this guy that comes out here and is hanging out with all the rejects? Everyone we hate, that the religious leaders are like, these people are going to hell and blah, blah, blah. And this guy, who is he? He's coming around, hanging around with people. And that was bad enough. Then people start claiming that he's healing them. Now that's, so then the religious leaders are like, okay, they represent the most conservative of conservative, that's like, you can think of it like the Catholic Church, like the strictest Catholic Church. And, so then you got Jesus healing people, and they're like, okay, that's weird. And then he starts talking about things like, he straight up just starts saying, like, I am the Son of God. You know what I mean? And so, okay, they're like, who is this guy? Oh, I remember what it was. It wasn't just him saying the Son of God. So they're saying he's healing people. And then he started going to people and saying, your sins are forgiven. And so they're like, okay, who does this guy think he is? Does he think he's God? What does that mean? There's a man. Think about it. If you went across the street and told your neighbor that his sins are forgiven, that's just weird. You know what I mean? It's like, what does that mean? Why would anybody do that? It's one thing to forgive someone who's wronged us. That makes sense. It's one thing to forgive ourselves, but to go and walk to a stranger and say, your sins, whatever you've committed in your life, those are forgiven. So the only person who could do that is someone who believes that they are God. You know what I mean? Because that doesn't make any other sense. He has to actually believe that he has the power to forgive. And in that context, in that cultural context, everyone agreed that the person who had the ability to forgive was God. So he's over here. They're like, okay. And then he actually starts verbally saying, his disciple Peter, he asks Peter, who do you think I am? And he says, I believe you're the Son of God. And he says, you're right. But the reason why you're right is because the Spirit told you that, because you didn't know that. So then you have this man, he's done all this stuff, and now they're like, okay, he's gone full crazy. He's saying he's the Son of God. That's when it comes down to the point where it's like, we have to kill him. But this whole process, he's trying to save people, and he's trying to save them in different ways. He's trying to save them personally by telling them, he would walk up to a woman who committed adultery, who's considered like the most despicable in the eyes of these misogynist religious leaders, and he comes over and he's like, your sins are forgiven. And so then there's this thing that's like, okay, so that's the image. So now that Jesus has become a man, he starts to actually understand where all these people are dealing with. So he comes down to this woman and he's like, he actually tells her, she's like, are you married or something? She says, no, I'm not married. He's like, you're right. You've been with 3 men, and the man that you're with is married, or is the opposite. I can't remember. And then she was shocked. She's like, how do you know that about me? And then she starts realizing that he's God, but he forgives her, even though she's like a homewrecker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
He forgives her because he understands. He's understanding the human way. So in my mind, and I could be kind of wrong, but Jesus is like this conduit and he's like this in between, kind of showing like, God, see how these people are, and then he's telling the people, look how God is. So he's this in between, this communicator. So then comes down to the concept of sin. It's like, okay, so you're sinful, but no matter what you do, you can't get rid of it. You could stop cursing, but then you might start being mean to people, or you may not be mean to people, but you have addictions that are hurting you and hurting your family or whatever. Everybody's got something different. And so it's like, okay, so what do we do with that? And so Jesus, like, this whole time, is like, I'm the in-between. I'm here to advocate for you to God.
Yeah.
You know, I'm here to be like, okay, look, yes, they're flawed. Yeah, they're sinful, but they don't really know what they're doing. It's in their nature. So I'm here to, you know, make it in between. But the thing is that sin, because it exists forever, it's like, okay, now here's the problem of when we die and it's just our souls left. How do we communicate with God? Mm-hmm. So it's like we have to be forgiven and like cleansed so that we can, because sin is the separator. So we got to get rid of that to get to God. And it's like, how is that possible? Well, Jesus is holy. And there is a eternal, I wouldn't want to think about it necessarily as a punishment. I think that's the way people have kind of seen like not going to heaven. They've seen it as like this great punishment. I kind of more just see it as kind of like, kind of just sort of, it's like you missed the boat and you fell in the water. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And sure. You like, you're drowning in the water, but it's not really like God is like waterboarding us. You know, like we it's like the whole like Noah's Ark thing. You just kind of missed the boat. Right. You know, and I can't tell you what hell's like, and the Bible never really is that clear on what hell is like. So it may not even be what people think it is. But people would rather commune with God than whatever the opposite thing is. You know?
Right.
So what Jesus does is, since he's pure and holy, it was customs back in the day that you would kill a lamb, an unblemished lamb, to forgive your sins. That was like that was the Jewish tradition. And Jesus was a Jew, and Jesus was trying to communicate to people what we're doing. So he's like, you know what? I am holy. I am God. Mm-hmm. I'm the purest that there can ever be. Spill my blood and you're all forgiven. So that's what he got, but that's not why he was crucified. See, that's the thing. Jesus always knew he was going to die. He talked about it from like a young age. Mm-hmm. You know, he knew that was his mission, but no one really knew how he was going to get there. But all those claims of him being God and stuff is what led to that happening. So the man's crucified, you know, one of the worst forms of execution in history. But his blood is spilt, and he has accomplished, you know, he says on the cross, it is finished. He's accomplished that atonement that he wanted to do the whole time. Now, so then the whole concept is like, okay, do you accept him as Lord? Because he saved you. Why wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. You know? And so then that's what the disciples start doing. They start going around. They're like, look, this is what he did. Like, believe in him. And because also Jesus talked about, when I die, I will send a helper. And what he means by that is the Holy Spirit. And so these disciples felt that that the Holy Spirit was leading them, and they're like, look, God's Spirit is with us. He died. His Spirit is with us. Let's commune. Let's meet with God together. We can communicate with God here on earth, and then when we die, we can really communicate with God. And so that's really the whole concept. And a lot of people have switched it to something different, that it's turned it into this like God has like this sword and he's ready to cut our heads off, you know, and you better like not have sex, and you better not do this and not do that, or else God's going to curb stomp you, you know?
Right.
But that's not at all what the story is. The story is more like God being like, I want these people with me, but I don't know, but I can't do that. Mm-hmm. You know? And then it's like, well, Jesus is like, I'm the middleman. I'll do it.
Right.
And so that's really the whole concept of the sacrifice. A lot of times when a Christian, or when someone's a new Christian and they learn that, there's this gratitude that they feel, because they truly feel that is real, that is, you know, and I believe that is real. And when that happens, you are inspired, you're excited. The whole concept that, oh, God's not this image that I created. He's actually more compassionate. He actually loves, you know, those who are the unloved, quote unquote, in society. And that now that I am saved and I can commune with God, see, now there's a new thing. So if I can commune with God, what does God want to tell me? What does God want to teach me to do? And then that, you know, that's when Jesus has left so many precepts for people to learn from, you know, the blessed are the meek, you know, blessed are they that mourn, blessed are, you know, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful. He, like, all of that is the blessings that God wants on people, but also people us here have to give that because Jesus isn't here. So we have to be that for other people. That's the whole concept of Christianity, is that we are supposed to be like Jesus because Jesus isn't here right now.
Right.
And people have, and especially in America, people almost don't focus on that part at all. They just focus on don't do this, don't do that. Another thing that bugs me is they love to only talk about Jesus dying, which is really like weird and masochistic to me. They're always like, Jesus died, Jesus bled, Jesus is like, we get it. We get it. What happens after that? Because I don't want to keep going to church hearing about this nasty, brutal execution that happened.
Right.
What does that mean for me? Does that help me? Or is Jesus just like fire insurance?
Mm-hmm. That's the way you're talking about Jesus, I think that's really interesting, relating it to Kanye and this album, is that you really describe Jesus as like a communicator and like that middleman and somebody who didn't believe in showing off his powers. And I see that's largely, I think, the way Kanye's gone and like probably what he's learned from finding his faith again. He went from Jesus, where he calls himself a god, to having an album called Jesus is King, and right. realizing I don't think the album has like a narrative like Jesus has the narrative, but it's more like an arc where we see Kanye learning that and not succumbing to his vices, not allowing the anger and frustrations he has of the world overtake him, but instead realizing that all you can do is preach the word of God and like hope people see what you're saying, like hope people are inspired by it.
Exactly, and that's really what it is about sharing. And a lot of people switched it over the centuries into like forcing people to believe something, and you just can't do that. You can stab them and kill them and burn them. You still can't force someone to. You can make them say things, but that doesn't mean they believe it.
Right.
And so the whole, it's supposed to be like, okay, well, you believe that God came and communicated with you somehow. No one forced it down your throat. Why are you doing it? Don't do that, and so I see that in the album, that I don't get this sense that he's not really preaching. He's just more like, this is me. This is what happened to me. This is my life. I feel saved. I am saved. Not I just feel saved. I am saved with a confidence. That's different than I'm afraid to talk to God because we haven't spoken so long.
Right.
Now he's like, God is in me. That's so different now.
Yeah.
And I think with that, I also love that song "Hands On" with Fred Hammond and how they were like, how he used his vocals is beautiful, but I also like the part about Fred Hammond and his lyrics where he's like, if all you have is criticism, you know what I mean, then.
Right.
Then basically, I can handle that, and I can take that, and I can take that you're skeptical about me changing, and all of that, and that's part of the journey. Many people, that happens in the old times in the Bible. Like I said, a lot of the people who followed Jesus either kind of had a bad rap sheet, or maybe were straight up former criminals and stuff. So people are like, no, they didn't change. Like, what is that? What are they doing? And why would Jesus even love them? He can't be God, because God would never love someone like that. And the interesting thing about Jesus, too, is I think Jesus is one of the, of course we all know this. Jesus is one of the most polarizing figures in all of history. And the reason why he's polarizing is, there's a lot of people that want to say, oh, Jesus was just a good teacher. But the theologian C.S. Lewis, one of the greatest theologians of all time, he said that Jesus never gave us the room to call him just a good teacher. He has claimed that he is the Son of God. So that means that either A, he's a liar and is trying to mislead everybody, and which is evil, completely evil. But there's nothing about his nature that gives a sense that that's who he is, that he has a lying nature, not based on anything as anyone has read, or the disciples were all killed mercilessly and brutally. They claim that they saw Jesus. If you didn't really see Jesus, I don't know why you'd put yourself in that position.
Right.
So either he was lying and all these people died for nothing, or he was crazy, so he'd be a lunatic. But that also doesn't really seem to fit, He's going around. He speaks so well. If you read the Bible, he speaks better than anyone can speak. I don't understand how he can speak so well. People would try to trap him with questions, and he always figured out a good way to get out of it. He talked like a lawyer. You know what I mean? Like, he was always like, nobody could ever like trip him up in what he said. And so he never gave a sense that he was crazy. He was like too smart. So then he just claims that he's the Son of God. So it kind of turns into one of those things where it's like, okay, well, he gave no room for you to be like, he's just a teacher. He's one of those three things. And it just depends on what side of that do you believe. I believe that he's actually Lord, that he's actually God. But you could believe the other two as well. And a lot of people do believe the other two. And so that becomes a really interesting thing. Nobody refutes that Jesus the man existed. Most people will fight over whether he was the Son of God, but a lot of that also becomes the fact that the reason why we do that is because Jesus never gave any room to be anything in between. That's why people argue about Jesus for so long. That's why he's so polarizing, because he didn't give that room. If he gave that room, there probably wouldn't be that many passionate discussions about Jesus. It'd probably be similar to like Buddha or something. So I think what Kanye is doing is he's just like, he's sold out, and in a positive way. In a positive way.
I get that. Yeah. And I guess just going beyond like the state Kanye's in when he makes the album, musically, I'm really interested in talking about, because you seem to be fairly knowledgeable of gospel music, and I'm wondering what's your reaction to like sonically, like the way the album sounds and what's typical of that kind of music.
I think it's great. I think the arrangements, especially the very first track, obviously is the purest, the purest gospel. I love the words that are said from the choir. I love the way it's mixed. It's unique in the way that it's mixed. It's really crisp. I think he might have sped up the choir.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's really a really unique take on how to do that. I feel like I've never really seen anybody like manipulate the choir like that. Not that it hasn't been done. I've never heard it. Usually people kind of leave the choir as is. But that was really cool to see how he kind of treated it like a sample.
Knowing Kanye, it feels very purposeful to like start the album with just the Sunday service choir, and to speed them up a little bit, and like there's the sound of that song exists entirely outside of the album. Like we head into Salah after that, and then there's like an organ and synths, and like it's a song, it's very musical, or instrumental, I guess, and it feels very purposefully in that way that Kanye is starting with this more traditional gospel-y sound, and then, or maybe just like more of something you would hear like in a live setting, say, and then heading into something very produced, as suddenly it's like, okay, now we're on the journey Kanye's on, and he's hoping to become part of that, part of that every hour setting, which I think is what happens at the very end of Jesus is Lord. Suddenly, he's part of that instrumentation and, singing until the Lord comes down, like they say in every hour.
Oh yeah, no, it's beautiful. But then you also like Selah is great because that Hallelujah portion is it's so powerful. Like I love that he's letting these choirs do their thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's not trying to over Kanye it. He's not really trying to get in the way. I think that's why, from someone who likes gospel music, I think that's why it stands out so well, because he's not trying to make that choir something that it isn't. He's actually staying true to that kind of form. He arranges it differently, of course. He'll like the beginning is just full of these crazy drums and all that stuff, and then of course that's the typical Ye thing where you're gonna like kind of like blend them together like half and half, but yeah, they really do their own thing. That's awesome. The sample on Follow God, that is awesome to hear in someone still talking about stretching their hands to God. That's awesome. I'm sure he found that and was like, that's perfect. But and I wonder how he found it too, because that's like really obscure.
Yeah, he must like go like dumpster diving for records or something because like
he does yeah.
Like on Ye he has the Shirley Ann Lee, whatever sample he uses on that, like that was totally random, and like that was an album that like never actually happened. Like most of her songs are just like demos and shit. So like
yeah, that's crazy. And so yeah, I think also because of that, comes you start to feel the old Kanye, but you still feel he's still like adding like God's spirit in it.
Yeah.
And I love the line in Follow God where he says, he said it ain't Christ-like, but no one tells you what it's like when you're like Christ. And I think that is true of Christianity. I believe that there is so much focus on what is wrong and very little focus on what's right.
Sure.
Like in the way that a Christian should carry on their life. And I think that's why there's so many like shitty Christians, like in the way that they live their lives, because they're just so focused on what not to do. And more than likely, they don't even live by it either, because it's really impossible to like live your life and be like, I'm not going to do any of this shit. That's never going to happen. There's a Bible verse that says if anybody says they're without sin, they're a liar. And so a lot of people, like, I remember I sat in, because I have a minor in I minored in biblical studies. I remember I sat in a actual classroom with an actual very like accomplished professor, and he said that he believed that you can get to a point in your faith where you never sin again. And I was like, you're out of your mind. And his reasoning was because of this stupid like personal experience where some lady told him that she hasn't sinned in like so many years, and he believed her. And then he's going and he's teaching class. Man, I did not let that go. Me and him were going at it. But because there's not enough focus on that. And I like that Kanye said that. Very short, he said it in one line, and I think people could miss it, but it's true. There's truth in that.
Yeah.
Also, I have to say, I love the Chick-fil-A line on Closed on Sunday.
Yeah, very controversial.
I love it. When I first heard it, honestly, when I saw it Closed on Sunday, I was like, if this man does not mention Chick-fil-A, this is a missed opportunity. I never crave Chick-fil-A unless it's Sunday. I don't know why it is. I think it's the devil himself. I don't know. I'll be in the car with my wife, and I'm like,
I need waffle fries.
Yeah, exactly. I need Chick-fil-A really every time. I was at, man, as soon as I went to go see Sunday service in the Forum the other week, and Kanye starts with Closed on Sunday. And immediately I'm like, I need that. But whatever. And yeah, and it's so I don't understand. I understand. I'm not going to say I don't understand. I understand the backlash about the line. I understand that. You know what's funny? I'm sure I don't have it anymore. I had the CEO of Chick-fil-A's phone number in my phone. I actually could have called the CEO of Chick-fil-A whenever I wanted.
I don't even know if we have time to get into that story.
No, not at all. I just remember that I went to like a class. I went to like this weird seminar or whatever, and he gave like all the people in the seminar his number. It was super weird. Wow. But anyways, I understand why people, get upset about the line because of, their stance on homosexuality, which is another side, of Christianity that most of us hate. And, the judgmental side. So I understand. But if you hate it so much and you're so angry, I want to see your receipts. I want to see what you got. You did get the number one with the lemonade. Don't act like you didn't. That's what I want to see. If they hate it so much, I want an audit of every fast food receipt ever. So that's all I have to say about that line, because I think it's clever. I like the way that it's. Yeah. I immediately understood that it is. It's a metaphor for a woman who's trying to tempt him away from his wife, and it's awesome because it is that concept of, well, couple things. He's closed on Sunday, he's closed from her, but then at the same time you could also see it as the other side, that he's tempted, but It's Sunday. So thankfully I don't have to give in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm close
no
to
choice.
God. I'm close to God, so I'm safe now.
Yeah.
You know, which every person who says that, Jesus says, don't be too confident in saying that you overcame a certain sin, because you never know when it might come back.
Sure.
Which is true. Is very true. But I do appreciate that line. I do appreciate that sentiment.
Yeah.
What do you think about On God?
I think a big part of this album is Kanye realizing what God means to him, because that's the one thing I take away from the album, and the way everyone's like, oh, Kanye's just talking about God, and it's so simple, and it lacks like the depth of a usual Kanye album. Like, to me, anytime Kanye's talking about anything external, it's all part of an internal journey he's going on. So like, Ye is completely being about being bipolar and going through all of the motions, and the flood of emotions you have being in that state. So to me, On God, like, it just, again, piles onto like what I think he's exploring in this album, is like saying like that's on God, like saying what parts of his life he's been able to, I don't know how to eloquently say this, I guess, but like how he's deriving meaning from God, and where he sees like God is helping him and making helping him make like healthier decisions, and then combining that with like the urban slang of like On God, like, is such a Kanye thing to do. Like I love it. Yeah, that he's adding that element to it.
Yeah, I love it, and that's like another thing that shows like he's still attached to the culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He hasn't completely changed the vernacular, but he has changed the meaning. In his interpretation, he's changed the meaning.
Yeah,
and I like that. I also really appreciate. I always felt that, and I wanted him to see him do that in the future. I'm glad to hear him say that his genius is from God.
Right.
Because I feel like in some ways that's even more bold than just saying I'm a genius. Because to also, there's a form of humility right there, and saying that, okay, it's God's doing and not my doing. But it's still a very powerful statement to say, because it means that you believe that God has given you a gift, and a powerful gift. Mm-hmm. That in itself, some people might think that part is arrogant. But if you're a Christian, you don't think it's arrogant, because you believe it's true. Right. And that's the thing. That's Jesus did the same thing. He said, I'm the Son of God, but at the same time, he also showed that he was humble. So it's like, how is a humble man saying he's the Son of God? Because he is the Son of God. He's stating a fact. Yeah. He's like, I can back it up. Same thing with Kanye.
I think that's largely what I was trying to say, is like, it's so different from like I Am a God, where Kanye is recognizing God and Jesus in the song, and like, acknowledging that they gave him this power, but like the ego is there like immensely, to the point where it like kind of overpowers the point that God gave you this power. Like, where On God is like completely relinquishing the power, the ego, and just saying like, this is on you, like I'm here because of you. Exactly.
And I think that, yeah, that's powerful. And I just love the beat. I wish they could mix the synth at the beginning just a little louder, because I really like the sound of that synth. I just wish it was like a little louder. That was really cool. I like that beat.
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Any other songs stand out to you?
Yeah, Everything We Need, we already talked about that. Listening to The Storm, and then hearing how Everything We Need came out. I love the message. It kind of reminds me of J. Cole's Love Yours.
Sure.
But better. I would say musically better, right, in my opinion. It's just a great message. It's very simple. I like Kanye's raps. I feel like everyone, like I said, gets mad about the lyrics, but Kanye has stopped tightening his lyrics since Yeezus. We all know this. There's even in like Pablo, there's very few moments where it's like tightened up.
I I guess I don't feel that way. I think some of the lyrics in that song are kind of awesome. Like, what if Eve ate
Oh
apple
no,
juice?
their lyrics are awesome.
Yeah.
No, yeah, he has moments of genius in them, but they're not tight like
Okay, I see. Yeah.
like gorgeous on My Beautiful Dark Twisted
Sure,
Fantasy. You know what I mean? That's more what I mean.
Sure,
so,
sure.
and I think people who complain, it's like, look, he's not doing that anymore, and he hasn't been doing that. So that's the way I feel about that. Water, everybody loves Water. I like it, but I don't like it that much.
Okay. You don't like that he
love
added
it.
water sounds?
Oh no, that's cool. That's cool. I actually, once it starts getting to like Jesus, give me the Jesus, I really kind of start to get into the vibe of it. So I think it's like a slow. It's like more of a.
It is.
It's like starts slow and then it builds up.
It's a strangely structured song because it kind of builds to like the middle and then kind of like water, I guess, kind of like a wave. Like the wave crashes and then like water's just flowing out and then like it's kind of just like a low key like song after that. And even Kanye's part, like even though it's like a litany and he's going, like it's not super upbeat. Like the song just kind of like fades out. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that too. And then with God Is, first of all, the beginning sample is so moving in and of itself. It's all he could have had the sample as like an interlude and it was moving. But his like how heavy, like how hard he goes in his delivery, and you just start hearing the voice straining and the, that's the Kanye I love. I love that Kanye when he's like pushing his voice to the limits, but he doesn't care.
Yeah.
Because he's just trying so hard to get that emotion out. I love that.
Yeah. Very, probably the most bare naked he's ever been on a song.
Yeah, I would say next to, and people probably wouldn't even understand why I say it, but next to part 2 on The Life of Pablo,
Sure,
I think.
yeah.
Hands On might be my favorite.
Oof, yeah, definitely.
Like I said, already talked about it with Fred Hammond, just his voice, the way his melodies just kind of, he just has a really interesting way of structuring the melodies. They're not that predictable, but they still all make sense. Like the way he runs up the scales and goes down, like it's like, yeah, of course that makes actual sense, but I would not have thought to make a melody like that. Mm-hmm. I love just the whole concept of like, you know what, you probably don't believe me, but this is real for me. Mm-hmm. I love that message.
Yeah.
And what he did with Fred Hammond's voice reminds me, it's reminiscent of the way he does it, works with Bon Iver.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking it's Bon Iver.
I think so too.
I think it was a song, but there's some song where everyone was like, oh my God, he got Bon Iver in the album. I'm like, I don't think he did.
No, he didn't. But you know what? Speaking of Bon Iver, I don't know if you know about the Francis and the Light song.
Yeah.
The more recent one that has Kanye and Bon Iver on it.
Oh yeah. What is it? Something The Light?
The Light, I think. He performed that at Sunday service, and I was like, what is it? For a second, I haven't listened to it in so long, so I was like, what is this song? And Francis just does so well singing it.
Yeah, I love that song.
Yeah, it's great. I wish that was on the album. That's awesome.
That would have been cool.
Use This Gospel. Anybody, first of all, it is so, this man got the clips back together, and he got Kenny G. Like
Crazy.
you can tell Kanye was probably just like laughing, like just probably like there's no way that anybody sees this coming at all. Like, and you know what's so funny though? When I saw that he got Kenny G for Kim Kardashian, I was like, man, I hope he's on an album just for fun. And I just never would have thought that would have been real at all.
You know the story of how he got on the album, right?
I only know about like the Valentine's Day thing or whatever.
Oh, no. So Kenny G came by the studio, and he must have secretly just wanted to be on a Kanye song. The only reason he's there. And he heard the clips on and said like, hey, like a sax solo would be great here. And it really did just kind of happen on the spot. Like Kenny G went in and did it. And like, it's such an insane, what a crazy confluence of events to like Kenny G's
awesome.
in the studio and like just suggest something totally random, and of course Kanye like vibes with that and throws it on, and like something no one would ever do to me just makes so much sense in the moment. Like to strip all of the sound and the beats out and to just have this kind of like heavenly saxophone, it's crazy. It makes so much sense to me.
And the song sounds better live as well.
Yeah.
It's crazy how good it is. And Jesus is Lord is too short. Jesus is Lord is... And what sucks is I saw the film, and Jesus is Lord is super long in the film.
Oh, I don't remember that.
I'm like, that Jesus is Lord is like 2 to 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, how did this man cut it down to 49 seconds and think that was okay? It had an amazing outro. Like this amazing, huge, giant outro. Reminded me a little bit of 808s.
Yeah.
And didn't do it.
I think probably he just wanted to keep it like a very humble, like low-key moment. Like he went on this big, long journey, and like, you know, Kenny G played the saxophone, and like the light came down, and he's just kind of basking in it.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that.
But I see what
like
you
I
mean.
said, yeah. Yeah, well, what it is once you've heard it, you know what I mean? Then you know what you're missing. You're like, oh my gosh.
Well, you just go back and watch the movie if you want to hear it so bad.
Yeah, and I actually hope they release it somehow.
Yeah.
Because it was really good. Did you see it?
Yeah, I was actually at the Chicago listening party, and I saw it before most people did.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I in IMAX it was incredible, and the sound.
Gosh, yeah.
The sound was incredible. Also, you know what's crazy? IMAX showings start like on the dot. like we were just like barely sitting. We were barely sitting down and just started. But it was cool, and yeah, I don't know. It's a great way to end an album, and also it's fun when you have it on auto repeat. And it just goes
totally.
When it goes straight back to every hour, it just sounds natural.
Yes, I completely agree. Like I listened to it like, you know, 5 times the first day. I was walking around my apartment like vacuuming, just had it on loop in my head, and like didn't
5
even
times.
notice.
Those are rookie numbers.
Well, I had people coming over that day. We were having a housewarming party, so like, I did as much as I could.
Yeah. No. It's great. It's fun. I love it. People hate it. But you know what's the crazy? You know what I'm realizing though is that as I comb through, everybody has different favorite songs.
Oh, totally.
So I feel like that's another hint that in the future it's going to be more well loved, because if everybody has a favorite song, then it can't be a bad album, right? You know, so it'll be interesting to see. But the only thing that matters to me is that it spoke to me, you know. And I think a lot of people really get caught. Like I was on the internet and on Reddit, and I saw that like Pitchfork gave the album a 7.2, which I think is awesome. I thought they were going to trash it.
Oh yeah.
And everyone was like in the comments were like angry. And they're like, how could they say this? How could they? And it's like, why do you care? If you don't like it, you don't like it. You know, and that I feel like people should go back to being like individualistic like that. Like people just get like, you know, they'll see like Anthony Fantano or they'll see anything and they're like hurt. They're like hurt. Like, oh no, he gave it a 4. Like, come on. Like,
that's just shit, man. That's what I realized about like social media and Twitter. Like if I just say I like something, you just immediately people are like L mid, like what are you talking about? Like what? Why is this the conversation we're having? Like either understand why I like it or like just ignore it.
Exactly, you know, and I used to think I remember Tyler the Creator way back in the beginning of his career said that he wanted to start a magazine where he like focused more on just like being straight up and being like this shit's trash or whatever. But now I feel like that's just everywhere now, and it's not cool anymore.
Yeah, it's one of my least favorite parts of Twitter. But you know what? If anybody wants to interact with me, like I'm there for it. Like any Kanye fan wants to jab and jaw about Kanye, like I'll partake. So.
And what I love about Jesus is King is the thing I love about Jesus is King is that I can pretty much recommend it to everyone and know that, you know, they may not like it, but you just feel like safe in recommending it to people. You know,
sure.
It's the same way that you feel safe in recommending 808s, even though that's also divisive. But because it's just a pure, clean album that
my mom
just
could
kind
listen
of
to it.
Yeah, it's just focusing on emotions and stuff, and it's like, okay, anybody could listen to this, and yeah, so there you go. He has 2 albums now that you can play to your children.
Two albums and Hey Mama.
And Hey Mama, there you go. So yeah, so now I know that I can when I have when I have my future kids. Now I know I can play some Kanye around them.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you. Well, that's shit. We really went into the woods there, but I love it. And again, I feel like we really got a different perspective from you than we've gotten from anybody in the show so far. So thanks so much for doing this. Anything else you want to cover?
No, actually, no. Just anybody who doesn't know who I am, go ahead and go to the channel The Most Unruly on YouTube, because I talk a lot about Kanye. So if there's any other opinions you wanted to hear about his stuff, it's pretty much all there.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I was telling you before we started the show, I was watching your Kill Bill video, and you're starting to dip into movies a little bit, so people can look forward to that.
Yes, also starting to dip into movies. So whoever's into movies, that'll be great. I am doing a series on Quentin Tarantino, and that's gonna be fun.
The Kanye West of cinema.
Exactly. That's exactly what he is.